Take two.
Welcome to the While You Grow podcast with Dr. Courtney Addison and me, Addison Powell, where we will dive into all things pediatrics, occupational therapy, and other important topics around children and development. So, if you are a parent, occupational therapist, student, or just want to learn more about occupational therapy and pediatrics in general, then keep listening. For more information on the podcast and to follow us on social media, take a look in the show notes. Let's get started. All right, welcome to the While You Grow podcast. Here we are again with another Zoom. And again, I'm Addison.
And I'm Dr. Courtney Addison.
And today we have Miss Denise, who
is, I would consider, a long-term friend from far away. Denise, you live in Maine, correct?
Yes, Western Maine.
Yes. So I have been getting intuitive readings from Denise for 3 years. She has seen me pre-marriage, post-babies, during babies, all kinds of things. But more of her history today and kind of what we brought her in to kind of talk to us about is a little bit about her background in special education and developing empathy. So welcome, Denise. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you enjoy doing, maybe what do you know about OT?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on. This is a pleasure to be with both of you today. My professional background is I was a special ed teacher for 35 years, all from preschool through the college level. My undergraduate work was in elementary education. I also had a dual undergraduate degree in, back then it was called emotional disturbance. Now you can't say that, but that's what it was back then. And my graduate work's in educational leadership. And then I have, 26, 28 postgraduate credits in counseling, mental health, that type of stuff. So those are my professional qualifications. I'm also the mother of two highly sensitive, somewhat neurodivergent adult children. I'm a little bit neurodivergent myself, so I can go with that. Now, I joke about it, all that background. Now I'm a phone psychic, and I love it. And what I absolutely love, and I'm very, very impassioned about right now, is that we are coming together in humanity. We're coming together, we're finding each other, we're lighting the way for each other. So no matter how dark it might seem, just the fact that you and I connected 3 years ago, I mean, that blows me out of the water.
Right. So also you mentioned, I kind of found you through your podcasting, Enlightened Empath with Samantha. Very successful podcast if anybody else would like to listen to it. What kind of got you, for Addison's project, she developed a podcast, and that's where we kind of got with this capstone project. What interested you in doing a podcast?
I went in kicking and screaming, to be honest with you.
Same.
No, I met Samantha at a workshop, and we kind of hit it off. She asked me to be a guest on Psychic Teachers. There was a really nice response to it. She said, "Hey, would you consider this?" I said, "No, thank you anyway." And then just decided to give it a shot. And that was 2017 when we started that. So it's been a while.
It's been amazing. There's so many good, you guys kind of cover so many different things, all the way for how you describe it, like the wooey dooey kind of stuff, to just like basic practical things on that podcast. So, yes, so incredible. And, big part of the OT profession and our OT framework is spirituality. And everybody's spirituality looks different and understanding different things. But I'll let Addison kind of get to her question she's been dying to ask, which is interesting about the emotional disturbance thing. So we're looking at that in your podcast, and I'm like, do I fall under that? Or would I have to take my own classes for that? Like, all those things.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that? I don't know really anything like what would fall under that for a major. I've never heard of that. I don't know if maybe it's called, like you said, don't really use that language anymore, so maybe it's called something else. What would you say?
The focus was for, like my professional career, I worked a lot with behaviorally disordered or people who had a hard time regulating their emotions, or children who were in, or people who were in alternative settings, lockup, or residential treatment or that type of stuff. So they were pretty serious behaviors and emotional dysregulation.
Awesome. That's really interesting. I mean, you kind of learn a little bit of the stuff in like psychology and those types of areas, but can you also share a little bit about your journey with special education, in terms of, where you worked, what you did, all those types of things?
I ended up going into special ed. My younger brother was diagnosed with a variety of things before special ed was a known thing. So I watched the familial impact that had, and also the struggles that he had as a child and also going into adulthood. But when I was 14, they had a program for, I grew up working class, so for lower income folks, and they sent us to an institution to work with people that were, it was for the, I'm being careful with my words because it's such a different era, but it was a residential treatment facility for people that had some behavioral and cognitive differences. So that really led me on the special ed path.
Interesting.
So I guess we have OT students and we have parents, and kind of what I want to talk about is the importance of developing this empathy. Empathy doesn't always come natural to people, but it's so important, especially, about the OT profession and working with others. Talk about maybe how you developed outside of just being natural empath, but developing that empathy. I think that's really missing in the traditional medical model. But maybe kind of speak to that a little bit.
What I really have found over the years, all the years of special ed, is how many of those students, young adults, were highly sensitive people. And a lot of times the behaviors or the dysregulation was masking the sensitivity because they didn't feel safe or they didn't feel that they could. So there's usually, and some of the most intuitive, like crazy intuitive people I've ever met in my life were people that were on my caseload. So I love that. I also think that for modeling kindness, modeling empathy, empowering people to realize that they have that within them is incredibly, incredibly important, especially if for the empathic child that has been airdropped in, that doesn't really fit with the family, and they're trying to figure out, and they need a safe place. So as anyone, and OT is, I love OT because it empowers people to have a higher quality of life and independence and self-sufficiency. And it really does. There was an OT I worked with years and years ago, and she explained to me why you want kids to spin. Like they had a hammock swing to spin, and she taught me about vestibular development and all of those things. So when you learn those little tidbits about what might help regulate someone, I think the empathy becomes easier when people feel more in control of their shell and their surroundings.
Absolutely. Something that I've heard, especially from your podcast, the research and the evidence behind one of those strategies being meditation. Can you speak to developing meditation and maybe how it would help a practitioner in their practice or even a parent?
So I think that meditation helps you to go within, which is key. If you're going to be working with people and holding space for them, the more comfortable you can be with your own energy, with the own way you're wired, it's going to make it, as a practitioner, as a caretaker, as a teacher, as a fill in the blank, I think it's going to make it so much easier when someone is having a difficult time, you can recenter. So I think that's very, very important. But also anything we can do to help other people feel more empowered with how they're controlling and regulating themselves. I can't emphasize that enough. And even if it's as simple as deep breathing, that's something I used to do with kids. I said, just deep breathing and in, or you can have them feel like you have roots in your feet and it's all going out through your feet, or taking them out in nature. Or I think it's really, really, really a vital skill for ourselves, for our own mental health and stability, but also for the people that we work with.
Right. And you mentioned on a recent podcast of yours about the ability of meditation to rewire your neural pathways. So that is a huge strategy if you're focusing on something, and just changing the way you think about things can be very helpful.
Yeah. And the question I had next, you kind of already answered, because, when you imagine meditation, you think of like sitting on a mat, crisscross applesauce, and you're going, but asking a child to do that, and even go a step further, a child that is neurodivergent or special needs, like that might not work. And you kind of elaborated on other techniques that meditation can be as simple as just deep breathing. Mm-hmm. Which I think a lot of people don't know. It's just taking a minute to feel what's around you, feel your surroundings, and just take a moment for yourself to just breathe. And even though it's something we don't inherently have to think about to do, sometimes that purposeness of thinking about, okay, let me take a deep breath in, take a deep breath out, is just so therapeutic. And I think it could be definitely very beneficial for children. Mm-hmm. What other techniques or practices maybe have you used with children, special needs or not, to help them use meditation for emotional regulation and building empathy?
I think another aspect of the meditation is for people who may have a hard time in their physical body. Sometimes I've found it very, very useful to do something repetitive, to make something, to work on a project together, to have something that was focused on, so that it was allowing them to get in a more receptive state. And I love that you brought up the neural pathways, because I'm very, very passionate about brain chemistry. And I often will say, you want both hemispheres to light up. And when we do meditation, it builds new pathways across our corpus callosum and allows both hemispheres to fire in a way that it doesn't if we're just stuck in one. And you wouldn't use those words with kids, but if you're helping them get on both sides by doing something creative and doing something with speech, it is going to blend those together beautifully. So I think That's an important thing.
Were you, as a parent of potentially two children that, we call it like a touch of the tism or neurodivergent or all those things. I'm a big believer that everybody has a touch of the tism. Everybody has their own tisms. But what were some strategies as a parent that you utilized, or maybe some stories that maybe didn't work, or anything along those lines that you would give to the parents that are listening to this podcast?
I think it's really important for people that might have someone who has a touch of the tisms in their house, that it doesn't go away. It doesn't stop. My adult children and my grown son will call me and they'll say, ooh, bad case of the tisms today. And we'll laugh about it because it's funny. But when he was a little guy, it was really, really helpful for me to pre-teach if we were getting ready to go. Okay, if we have to leave in 10 minutes, okay, 5 minutes, we're going to get ready to go. Okay, you need to get your coat. We're going to leave in 7 minutes. Okay, and just that. When he was little, we would go to a playground, and it took me a little while to catch on, but he had to observe, he had to watch, he had to see how it happened. And then we'd go back the next time and he'd get a little closer. And I had to honor his process of what he was comfortable with to help him build the confidence to be able to do it on his own. So I think if you can, I'm a big fan of, break it down, task analyze it, give them little tiny bites so that they can have a level of success, but it's also going to be helping them to find their own coping mechanisms and ways of circumventing the tisms.
That's amazing. That's, Mason has autism, the boy that we've adopted, but he just finding that process, just reminders, just little chunks. That's so important for parents to remember. You're pretty much an honorary OT, right? From what you just said.
Oh, yeah.
She could take our boards and we could do fine. But that just task analyze of just one step at a time. Let's do this first. And but really, what I have found is more of, I've got to look inside myself and not put my expectations onto him. All right, we've got to be here at this time. We've got to make sure got a clean face. We've got to, that both socks match, all those things. Some of those things don't really matter, in the grand scheme of things. And put as a parent and an OT, not putting my own expectations on them, but helping them develop their own coping strategies that work for them. That's a really great piece.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that you've seen recently, a shift in how society treats and what their expectations are of people who are neurodivergent. Before, it's like, you need to make all the changes so you fit in our society. But I like to see that there's a little bit more of a change. We still have a long way to go, but making that shift that, like, you meet them halfway. And it's not just one person's responsibility to fit into society. It also just needs to be a collaborative effort to include everyone and appreciate everyone's differences, because everyone is, whether it's because of autism or something else. Everybody's just different, and nobody's going to think or do the same thing.
Right. Where was your question, Addison?
There wasn't a question.
This is just such good information too. And just as a parent and as, someone from the outside too, just remembering some of these tidbits are so, so important. You're probably familiar with this topic, but it's kind of a hot topic in OT now. It's called interoception. Are you familiar with interoception?
Vaguely.
So it's how we feel, it's how we know, like, our body systems are going, and like, when do we need to go to the bathroom? When are we sick? And those kinds of things. So that is a hot topic kind of now. Have you worked with your children on that at all, or any strategies? Because you just provided such a great strategy for time management and those things.
So intuitive. I just love that, because in the back of my mind, before you started speaking, I was thinking about, and paying attention to how they present bodily, how they present. So does their stomach get upset? Do they get stress headaches? Do they not sleep? Do they have food preferences at certain times for comfort? I mean, there's subtle little things that, as you start to pay attention, you can help promote an environment that will, my big thing is, everybody needs a place to feel safe. They need a place to feel like they're important and they matter. But when I think about how much energy it takes for not only a child who's identified, but anyone to go into a public education building or a private education building, getting bombarded with so much all day long. So I used to say, when my sons were younger, if they melted down at home, or if they had a really hard time or anything, I would say, they're working so hard to keep it together while they're out in the world. And if they feel safe enough to do that at home, it's not fun, but at least you know that you're doing your job to give them a safe place to learn how to regulate those emotions. I think that's, to me, it's very important, because it ties in with what you started with how do we teach empathy if we're not showing empathy to people that are trying to figure out how they're wired?
Right. Yeah. Right.
And can you even talk about, like, how can schools and staff, whether it's teachers, special education teachers, general education, OTs, speech, all of the different disciplines within a school and all settings really can help, I guess, I'm trying to find what I'm trying to say here.
Develop some of these, or create that space, I guess. Yeah. Create that space that help the child develop. Like, interoception is another sense, it's like smelling, seeing, hearing. It is a completely another sense. So it's important to develop, but what would be your suggestion for, I guess, what you're saying is some of those schools or places of where the children are to kind of embody that?
I think it's very, very important to empower, not enable. I will go to the grave with that one for anybody, that it is so important. But for me, as an educator, it was always important that everybody thought they were the favorite. Everybody felt valued. Everybody felt seen. Even the ones that just drove me nutty, I would just, and they would think, okay, I'm this girl's favorite. And it's like, okay, good. But that comes into holding, I'm going from a classroom. I ran a commercial kitchen with kids who were identified at a high school level. There were kids on the spectrum. There was it was kind of a melting pot. And one of the things that was a rule, because we had to all learn to work together and provide this service, we were waiting on hundreds of people every day. It was a real team effort, was that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. And I held that standard so that no matter what, with other students who came in that might not have been identified, it was always incredibly important to me that the people in my program felt that they were seen as an equal. And I think anything we can do to foster that, because in reality, the people who are, and I always refer to it as wired a little differently, they make the best adults. They're the curious, they're the learners, they're the inventors, they're the people that really light up the world. But high school or public school or elementary school isn't always the easiest place for them.
Right. Right. It's very structured, very, a lot of expectations. I think about, I also have a stepdaughter who is in middle school. She's going to be on the podcast telling us about her middle school experience this week because she's on spring break. And just how she talks about how much time they get outside. And it's kind of sad, that, they're in the classrooms all day. There's a lot of expectations put on them. And, but there's just different things we can do, little things like having a class outside one day, or just being intentional about, the time that they're spending, or just doing some meditations in class, or doing some deep breathings, or even just moving, like dancing, like having a good time. Like, let's just turn some music on and let's just take a break. So, there's just a lot of different strategies out there, but just like you said, reminder that the ones that are our creatives aren't going to look like the ones that can sit in a desk all day. Right.
Yeah. And people, I feel like, are not meant to sit in a desk and listen for hours. But I wanted to go back to you talking about like not enabling and treating them with mutual respect. I feel like sometimes, we're taught this as students, is there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. And sometimes those can get mixed up with people. Can you kind of elaborate on the differences of those, and what advice you would give to parents, educators, practitioners, whoever, of differentiating between having empathy versus sympathy for someone?
That's a beautiful, beautiful question, because I find it incredibly painful to see the look in someone's face when they know they're being pitied, and when they know that they're not being seen for who they really think they are, or they're being seen as less. That's a gut twin, a heart wrench for me when you see that. And I'm going to back up and then come back to this. That comes back to the empower, not enable. Is that we want? I think there are some wonderful programs with the best of intentions put into education systems, but what they do is they either isolate these children or they encourage them to stay with specific behaviors so that they don't have to be held accountable for their choices. And that's a harsh topic, but it's honest. It's very honest. And I think if we have this little window of time to help people become as self-sufficient, as self-regulated, as comfortable with who they are as possible. So, silly thing, I promise I'll get to your question. Years ago, I had this little boy, and he was wonderful and bright and had no impulse control, absolutely none, zippity-doo-dah. So I took tape and I put a little tape around his desk. They had little desks. And I said, as long as you stay inside the tape and you get your work done, you can sit under the desk, you can lay on top of the desk, you can do whatever you want to do, but you have to stay in this little area. It was like hitting a light switch, but it was very uncomfortable for other adults who saw that, because it was different, and well, that's not fair too. And I said, well, anybody can have the tape. It's not about the tape. It's about
the tape's free.
Right. It's about giving people the ability to make choices, which does tie in with the sympathy and empathy, because sympathy is, I feel sadness when I go to a funeral. I feel sympathy for what people are going through. I feel sympathy. I feel empathy when people are in situations where it's beyond their control and we're trying to empower them to realize they have choices. Huge, huge difference. And
that's a great description.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great description of that. Okay, so we we are on a budget here at our capstone program, so we only have a little bit of time left on our paid Zoom that we have. But I want to know, what's been your favorite job in your lifetime and why?
Professionally or personally? So I'm
Personally.
old. I've had a lot of jobs.
Oh, okay. What of each?
Okay. As weird as this sounds, my favorite professional job was I worked at an alternative school in Portland, Oregon, and they took all the kids from all the surrounding districts and they sent them to this behavioral program. This was back in the day, so I can use those words. But what I loved about that job is that the staff were all there for the same reason. They were all these kids, and the administrator, who I still really, really highly regard as one of the most favorite people I've ever worked with, his whole thing, you go in to get this job, has a staff meeting, and he said, you have to teach them to leave it at the door. They're coming from horrific situations. They're coming from backgrounds that you would not want anyone that you love to live in. But when they're here, we're going to do everything humanly possible to give them an education and make them feel safe and valued. And I love that. It was a benchmark throughout my career. And I taught a lot of kids over the years. Things are going wrong. You have to learn to leave it at the door, come in and focus on what you came to do, and then you can leave. So I love what I do now because I get to work with such a wide range of people, and it ties in with what I started saying, that, the goal is to come together in humanity. The one commonality that people share is emotion. There is no color, there is no socioeconomic background, there is no religion. We all share emotion. And that's exactly what you're both talking about, is when you get to that place of empathy, it brings that connection, that interconnectedness to people, which I think is what we're hoping for.
Absolutely. I had a question, but that is so beautiful. That's what connects this society and connects us. But going back to OT and OT professionals, we have to leave it at the door too, and so that we can be our best selves for those that we're working with. And more often than times than I would like to say, there's been times I'd have to check myself, like, all right, I got to leave that at the door, that thought, and just being present and practicing, which is so easier said than done, being present with others, being present in conversations. And another thing I love about you, Denise, is that you always say that life's not a competition. All these podcasts, we're here to help. And that's, there's other podcasts out there, but I'm just really, really thankful you were able to join ours and help support Addison in her capstone.
Yes.
So,
which is coming to an end.
Yes, it is coming to an end. And she's very excited. I'll have to have a new co-host, but as I said, we are very different. And so she is my Dr. Addison's. Well, she won't have to be bothered by them as much.
Well, I appreciate you both so much. And as you're speaking, people always think that OT is just for children or education, but I've watched so many older adults who have benefited from OT services that it's a lifelong process that you're offering, and it's never too late. There's always something that someone's going to gather. So, and congratulations on your capstone project.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All
Thank
right.
you for coming on. This has been lovely. I've loved this topic of conversation. It was great. So thank you.
I think she was a little nervous, though, to be honest. I told her, I was like, hey, I'm getting my psychic friend. She's going to come on. And Addison comes from like a little different background. So I think she had a different perception of what this was going to be like.
That's all you told me. So you didn't tell me about anything else.
A very talented medium.
Yes.
Extremely talented.
Thank you. And
Yes.
it's normal. I'm not airy fairy woo woo. Right? And there's no weird, but this goes back to the kids and empathy and compassion. Everybody's wired this way. Everybody. We just have to unlock that door a little bit for some of them.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you again. It's been lovely having you.
Oh my gosh, so great.
We better close out before Zoom closes out for us.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the While You Grow podcast. If you learned something on this episode, please like, share, and comment. Join us next time as we dive into all things pediatrics, occupational therapy, and other important topics around children and development.